Welcome back to the Hive Doctor, your beekeeping mentor. This is a swarm that you probably saw in one of my videos that had moved into some empty equipment that I keep stored on the end of my shed. Today I'm going to be showing you how to move them to the place that you're going to want to put them. In this case, it's going to be one of my nearby apiaries less than a mile away. Should be an easy move, I'm hoping. So here are several steps for you to think about before you have to move and relocate not only a swarm, but any hive. So stick around. All right, so the very first thing you need to consider is when you're going to move them. It really should be after dark when all the bees have come home. You don't want to leave any foragers out in the field that are still foraging on nectar and pollen behind. You don't want them to come home and find that home is no longer there. If it doesn't work doing it in the evening, then perhaps in the morning when it's still cool outside before they've started flying and foraging for the day, or if it's still dark in the morning. Either way, if none of those two options work for you, then either in the evening when they have all come home, plug up all the entrances, either with a screen wire mesh stapled in place, or some kind of breathable foam, or maybe even some strips of an old cotton rag or something where they cannot get out. That way when you are able to get around to moving them, all the bees will already be inside the box. The second thing that you want to make sure that you prepare is where you're going to move them. Go ahead and have that site prepared ahead of time. You don't want to transport your bees, get to where you're going, and still have things to do while they're sitting in the back of your vehicle waiting for you to get your stuff together. A third thing, and it's a very important thing I learned the hard way, is you need to, and this is especially true if you are moving a hive by yourself. That's really what I'm talking about today. I don't have a second person to help me move this colony, so I've got two straps on it. One towards the front of the hive and one towards the back, keeping all this equipment together as one piece so that when I pick this up, nothing's going to come apart. But even more importantly, while I'm transporting it, nothing's going to shift. And here's what I mean by that. If you only put one strap on this, the equipment will stay together, but it will pivot on itself and shift. So I have done this with only one strap before, got to where I was going, got out towards the back of my truck, found that the equipment had shifted, exposing the bees to be able to get out of the hive, and they were pissed. And I paid for it. I had to grab a veil real quick and get my smoker lit. So to avoid that equipment shift, just use two straps. It's worth it. It only takes a couple of extra minutes. Right here, I've just mimicked a setup of what I'm talking about. I just stacked these two empty honey supers on top of one another, threw just a scrap piece of plywood on top to also mimic a hive cover, and thrown a single ratchet strap around it. And then I pivoted the boxes to show you what can happen during transport. And these are the areas where, of course, the bees are going to be able to come in and out. And not only are you going to arrive on site with some pissed off bees, but during this equipment shift, there's a very good chance of rolling bees, squashing them, and of course that's going to irritate them even more. So make sure that you double strap your hives when you are transporting them. So, but if you are using two people, I still advise two straps, but make sure that you put the ratchets on top. Make sure that you're tightening things up here on the top of the hive cover. And the reason for that is when two people are moving these with one of those hive movers that lower down over a hive and have handles that come up, clip into the handles, and just pick the whole thing up with ease. It's so nice. Those things will not fit down over the hive when these ratchets are on the outside. You want to make sure they're up on the hive cover so that they're not in the way of that hive mover. Here's the hive mover I'm referring to. As you can see, it's got a pivot point right there on both sides. So this thing actually acts like a hinge. It lowers down over on one side, and this piece fits up into the handle, so it actually grabs the handle of the box on that side, And it does the same exact thing on this side. And you see it's got two nice foam handles for lifter number 1, 2 for lifter number 2. The only thing is that you still want to strap your hive when you move them this way, because this does not pick up the bottom board. And although the bottom board will probably go with it because it's been propolised by the bees, you don't want that thing falling off while you're in the middle of moving these bees. Bees are going to come out everywhere, and especially if you just didn't feel like putting on any protective gear that day, they're going to make you pay for it. So this is a great tool to have on hand, even if you're like me and you don't have an extra hand to help. You never know when you might find a buddy that's willing to help you move bees. And if you can provide some protective gear for them to wear, because likely they're not going to be a beekeeper, it'll make them feel a lot safer too. Another thing to consider is your back. Now, we're at the beginning of a nectar flow, probably a week and a half into it by now. This swarm came in right about the beginning, and if this was too heavy, I really couldn't move it. I would have to find some help. So the way to know if you are going to be able to lift it is just to kind of lift one end. Get an idea of its weight. If it's too much, or even close to thinking it's too much, don't even risk it. And if you can't find a second person to help you, just let them stay there. For the rest of the nectar flow, harvest the honey and then come back and move them then, because they will no longer have that honey weight on them, and they'll be much lighter for you to be able to move and relocate. So shortly, I'm going to be bringing you guys back and showing you me actually moving this colony into place. As you can tell, it's still quite daylight out, although it is evening. We're getting closer to sundown. I still got girls out flying, so this is not the time to move them, but it's a great time to have gotten them ready with my ratchet straps. And of course, before you start any of this, you want to smoke them first. That way it's safer and easier on you. You don't have bees flying in your face, stinging you in the hands. I'm going to show you how to load it, how to properly orient the hive within your vehicle so that frames aren't clacking onto one another, potentially killing your queen in transport. And finally, before we do get to moving them, one last thing is, not only do you want to strap the equipment together with double straps, but whatever vehicle you end up moving the colony in, you want to strap them in the vehicle as well. You don't want any accidents along the way, and you want them to be as immobile as possible. This colony should not be sliding around in the back of your truck, and if you don't have a truck, then it definitely shouldn't be sliding around in the back of your SUV or whatever you've got. Now today, my truck is taking a break. It needs some maintenance, so I will not be using my truck for this video, but I will be putting these in the back of my Jeep Cherokee. There's plenty of room, and it should work just fine. The nearby apiary is less than a mile from here. I'm going to be driving and taking it easy. We're going to arrive on site. I'm going to be able to back right up to the very hive stand that these girls are going to go on. I'll be back when it's dark, which for you should be as fast as this. Okay, it's a little darker on the screen than it is here in real life, but I've smoked the bees. I've got their entrances plugged. There's only two more things you want to make sure of before you load your bees. One, that the ratchet strap tag ends are up and tied out of your way. You don't want to be tripping over those on your way to the vehicle. Second thing is, make sure your vehicle is as close as you can get it and that the path to it is clear. All right, so let's go. Something to keep in mind, and one bonus tip I want to give you while we're driving over to put this colony on site is, if bees get out, because they tend to find their ways out even when you've done your darndest to keep them inside, don't freak out. You're driving and you have heavy machinery that you are operating, so don't freak out. Most of the time when you're transporting bees and they're inside of your vehicle like this instead of a truck, they're most likely not going to come after you. I've never had that be the case, and I've done this quite a few times. What they're going to be trying to do is get away, and they go to the light, which is the windows. So just keep all 4 windows cracked, which you should anyways, especially if you're transporting your bees in hot weather. And what that'll do is the bees will find their way to the window and they'll fly right out. Likely, if it's not too dark, they'll still orient themselves and find themselves back home. Now that won't do any good unless, and here's the bonus tip, you leave something called a catch hive. Now I've got that second swarm that moved in over there. It wasn't even 2 feet away from this colony that we're moving right now. And so if I did need to move that a little bit early and couldn't wait till dark like it is now, that swarm could serve as a catch hive. In other words, any stragglers, any foragers that I didn't get in this box will join forces with that one. All right, so last thing you need to think about is making sure that you remove anything that's plugging their entrances, especially with being dark like this. If you need some light, use a red light. Bees do not fly to red light. They will fly to bright white light. Don't worry about unstrapping them tonight. Do that another time. Just set them down, open the entrances, and drive away. So here's how you want to orient your hive inside of your vehicle. You want your frames perpendicular to your vehicle, because when you're going over bumps, this is what's going to happen, and the frames won't clack together, and that's good. But if you load them this way, and the frames are not glued in place, not propolized in place, then that side to side this way is going to clack those frames together, and that's when you potentially might pinch a queen between 2 frames. So let's avoid that and just load it up like this. So here we are the next morning, and the swarm that we moved last night, they're still strapped up. I can remove those straps whenever I feel like it. But the bees, as soon as they woke up this morning, they started orienting on their new location. So it's a simple move. Just remember the safety steps that we went over, and you should be fine. If you have any questions about moving a hive that is not in something simple like a 5-frame nuke box, drop me some questions in the comments below. Drop me one of these too. Tell your friends about the Hive Doctor, and I'll see all of you in the next video.